I can vividly remember the conversation I had with my parents about wanting to change my major before college. After touring literally a dozen universities set on studying chemistry, I realized that my passion was, and had always been, public service, and that I wanted to go to law school. So I approached my dad, an engineer who immigrated to this country for his education, and my mom, an engineer and rock star for women in STEM, and told them I wanted to study political science and economics. I wasn't just nervous, I was terrified. Upsetting the status quo in my family isn't something I yearn to do. It felt like a violation of my duty as a member. In a family where both my parents are engineers and both my siblings are computer scientists, my change of heart definitely came as a shock. But almost 5 years later, I'm still pursuing my dream of becoming a civil rights attorney. And my parents are ecstatic they didn't force me to become a chemist. Change begets new opportunities, experiences, and perspectives. But oftentimes, we forget to talk about how lonely change can be. Many of us move to DC to attend a new school, start a new job, or get a fresh start. But in 2023, DC remains the #1 loneliest city in the country. Not because people are stuck in a rut of continuity, but because they aren't. Gretchen Rubin, author of The Happiness Project, explains, change and life transformation make us feel lonely because they undercut the chance for deep connections. To be happy, we need to feel like we belong. We need to be able to give and get support. When your sense of belonging is suddenly swept out from under you, change begins to look bleak. I moved to DC from the Deep South last year, and y'all, it's a different world here. Having public transportation, living in a walkable city, and running into senators on the street, it's been an exciting experience. But moving to DC, changing my major, those weren't the biggest changes in my life. Far from it. In fall of 2020, I decided to dive deeper into why I had been struggling so much with school and my social life. At first, I thought it was just differences in communication and understanding, but quickly realized it went far deeper than that. I hyperfixate on details. I have auditory sensitivities, and I have extreme discomfort with things like clothing, textures, and disruptions in my routine. Most notably, though, I always felt like everyone around me had been given the script of life, and I hadn't. It was as if I was forced on stage to play the lead in a show I don't know the words to. Everyone around me knows what to say and where to go, and I am flying by the seat of my pants trying to blend in. I immediately dove into research. I read stories and narratives of people who felt exactly like I did. One person explained, "Finally, I have the words to explain why I felt like an alien for so long. Finally, I could stop feeling bad about being different." They were talking about being diagnosed with autism at ages ranging from 26 to 54. At first, I was in shock and honestly, denial. If I had autism, my parents, my teachers, my pediatrician, they would have known. But I decided to reach out to a specialist anyways, and after having a conversation, she scheduled me at her clinic. In November of 2020, I was formally diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. I remember my specialist saying it was so rare for this type of diagnosis to happen, but assuring me I was the poster child for women with autism, which I think is a compliment. My first reaction was relief. Having words to express and describe how you're feeling is incredibly uplifting. But as I sat with the news, I began to have a very different feeling. I felt alone. I felt alone in the sense that no one had been able to diagnose me sooner. I felt alone when people said, "But you don't look autistic." I felt isolated, frustrated, and embarrassed that things I had been struggling with for nearly 2 decades came easy to everyone else. I had always assumed everyone struggled together. Learning that I was the only one having a tough time was devastating. As time progressed, I began to question the inevitableness of autism impacting me long-term. If I had trouble and felt ostracized just naming the thing, how could I do anything? In that moment, the future felt impossible. Change often produces a sense of isolation, whether that's because you feel like you're the only one experiencing that change, or you're fighting an internal battle, or you feel like no one could possibly understand how you feel. What accompanies is a sense of non-belonging in every space you occupy. Women diagnosed late in life with autism routinely experience this feeling. Women camouflage their autism 3 to 4 times more than men. As a result, we often struggle from extreme exhaustion and anxiety through masking, which is exactly what it sounds like. Feeling like you're wearing a mask or performing in basically every social situation. MIT explains, masking actively precludes us from getting diagnosed, which leads to poorer diagnostic tools, which leads to less women getting diagnosed, which creates a feedback loop. Therefore, it's no surprise that the National Autistic Society explains, as compared to men, women are more likely to be misdiagnosed, with 43% of us diagnosed with something else before being correctly diagnosed with autism. This happens so frequently, in fact, that there's a name for the group of us who were diagnosed late in life: the lost generation. Women being diagnosed with autism isn't novel, yet research and science refuse to take us seriously. As a result, we are forced to endure the harsh change of our realities alone. But it really doesn't have to be this way. Knowing the signs, getting diagnoses, and changing our medical and education systems can help young women and girls live fuller, more accommodated lives. It can bring them out of the darkness of a new diagnosis and into the light of their new reality. After my diagnosis, I used my feelings of seclusion to do something about the current epidemic. It's what's led me to my current passion: speaking about autism in women and girls and helping people get diagnosed. I love doing exactly what I'm doing right now: educating communities and contributing to disability rhetoric. Through working with research grants to rewrite college curriculum, to understanding how women and girls with autism learn and thrive, I was able to take something that seemed like an insurmountable challenge and turn it into an opportunity for public service. Now, to wrap up my talk, I'd like to leave you with practical resources and a takeaway. First, resources. Come and find me after the talk on social media or at the law campus, and I'll give you resources that I curated. These resources identify how to spot autism in women, how to get a diagnosis, and most importantly, how to get girls the intervention they need early, and women the diagnosis they need now. These resources could be potentially life-changing for those struggling, so I urge you to share them with anybody you think could benefit. Maybe that's your sister, your mom, your roommate, your friend. These resources also have coping strategies for how to deal with a new diagnosis. These resources aren't supposed to make change easier, but they help show women that they're not alone. Finally, a new conceptualization of change. If my autism diagnosis taught me anything, it's that you have to give yourself the space to grieve your old life. Let yourself feel feelings of anger, frustration, sadness, and hurt. Change isn't supposed to be easy, and ignoring the ways that it affects us physically and emotionally makes it harder to adapt to our new realities. Understanding the seasons of change in your life allows you to understand that your feelings are valid and normal, and allows you to follow a path of opportunity and growth. I was never told that I was allowed to grieve my old life or the younger me that didn't have resources when she needed them. Being able to recognize that I can feel my feelings and everybody else has the same feelings as I do brought about immense clarity. My goal is that hopefully you feel changed now that you've heard this talk. Maybe you learned more about women and autism, or maybe you just learned that your feelings of post-changed isolation and loneliness are valid. Whatever your seasons of change bring you, know that you are not alone. In fact, you have never been closer to becoming the person you were always meant to be.